the state of California just became the first state to ban public schools from using the racial slur, which is the name of the Washington, D.C. professional football team. It is football, right? Yeah, it is. Yeah. And at the same time, 10 U.S. cities have said, Columbus Day? Nah, I don't think so. We will call it Indigenous Peoples Day. Now, why would they do that? Why would so many cities say, we're not all that excited about celebrating Columbus? Let me share some quotes from you. Just FYI. I mean, I've been doing this every Columbus Day since we started this program. In fact, if you Google Columbus Day and my name, you'll find a series of articles that I wrote back in 2003 and 2004 and 2005 and 2006 with these quotes and other things in them. But basically what I'm calling for here, I'm agreeing with these cities. Columbus Day is, it's not even an anachronism. It's an obscenity. Columbus Day needs to be replaced by Indigenous Peoples Day, and we need to do it in a way that can serve as a basis for a nationwide dialogue and educational moment for everybody on, Indigenous people, on who they are and where they are and what they're all about and all that kind of thing. So anyhow, apropos of that, as I said, let me just share some quotes. This is from the people who were with Christopher Columbus. Okay? This is actually Christopher Columbus himself. This is from Columbus's diary. He wrote, upon meeting the Taino or Arawak people who greeted him when they first arrived on the island of Hispaniola, he says, they brought us parrots and balls of cotton and spears and many other things, which they exchanged for the glass beads and hawk's bells. They willingly traded everything they owned. They were well built with good bodies and handsome features. They do not bear arms and do not know them. For I showed them a sword, they took it by the edge and cut themselves out of ignorance. They have no iron. Their spears are made of cane. And then, of course, Columbus gets to the thinking that is so characteristic of these European explorers, in quotes. They would make fine servants. With 50 men, we could subjugate them all and make them do whatever we want. Well, apparently, in the do whatever we want category, a childhood friend of Christopher Columbus's, Michel Laqueno, it's a man, was given a young teenage girl by Columbus. And he said, and he writes, this is in the words of Queno. These are his words, written in the late 1400s, early 1500s. When I had taken her to my cabin, she was naked, as was their custom. I was filled with a desire to take my pleasure with her and attempted to satisfy my desire. She was unwilling, and so treated me with her nails that I wished I had never begun. But to cut a long story short, I then took a piece of rope and whipped her soundly, and she let forth such incredible screams that you would not have believed your ears. Eventually, we came to such terms, I assure you, that you would have thought that she had been brought up in a school for whores. That's pretty astonishing. Although it does have two modern cliches in it. To cut a long story short, and you would not have believed your ears. I wonder if that's actually... Now, I know parts of that quote are right. I quoted these in Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight, but it was slightly different. Anyhow, this is from Bartholomew de Las Casas. He was the priest who accompanied Columbus. I haven't seen the original on this, but I've seen enough of this to know that this is actually... When Louise and I were in Mexico last spring, we went down to we were in Cancun, and we went down to there's a place where they've recreated an original Indian village there. And it's a museum, basically, and they've got all kinds of cool stuff going back thousands of years. And there's a gift store, and in the gift store there was a book of collected stories by the priests who had accompanied the conquistadors in conquering that part of Mexico. It was absolutely astonishing. I have it at home. And the priests just wrote so bluntly about what they saw. They were just like documentarians. And so what I'm going to read to you right here, this is from the priest Bartholomew de las Casas, who was with Columbus. But I'm telling you, I read very, very similar things by other priests who were with other conquistadors as well just last year. Anyway, and the Christians with their horses and swords and pikes, a pike is like a long spear, began to carry out massacres and strange cruelties against them. The Christians attacked the towns and spared neither the children, nor the aged, nor pregnant women, nor women in childbed, not only stabbing them and dismembering them, but cutting them to pieces as if dealing with sheep in a slaughterhouse. They laid bets as to who, with one stroke of the sword, could split a man in two or could cut off his head and spill out his entrails with a single stroke of the pike. Now, my question, I guess, and love to get your thoughts on this. The question is, how do we get out of this Columbus Day thing? How do we transition to Indigenous Peoples Day thing? And what do you do about the fact that there's a lot of Italians who think, and some Spaniards, who think that Columbus Day is the day that they should be celebrated? Okay, back to Bartholomew de las Casas, the priest. They took infants from their mother's breasts, snatched them by the legs, and pitched them head first against the crags, or snatched them by the arms and threw them into the rivers, roaring with laughter, and saying as the baby fell into the water, "Boil there, you offspring of the devil." Other infants they put to the sword, along with their mothers and anyone else who happened to be nearby. They made some low, wide gallows on which the hanged victims' feet almost touched the ground, stringing up their victims in lots of 13 in memory of our Redeemer and his 12 apostles. Then set wood burning at their feet and thus burned them alive. To others they attached straw or wrapped their whole bodies in straw and set them afire. With still others, all those they wanted to capture alive, they cut off their hands and hung them around the victims' necks, saying, "Now carry the message," meaning take the news to the Indians who have fled to the mountains. They usually dealt with the chieftains and nobles in the following way. They made a grid of rods, which they placed on forked sticks, then lashed the victims to the grid and lighted a smoldering fire underneath, so that little by little, as those captives screamed in despair and torment, their souls would leave them. Right. This is the Christopher Columbus, right? This is the guy that we're celebrating. I think it's time for us seriously to think about, about doing something about this. His first letter, Columbus's first letter to King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. By the way, these are all in an article by Katie Halper, and it's over at Raw Story. Your Highnesses, as Catholic Christians and princes who love the holy Christian faith and the propagation of it, and who are enemies of the sect of Mohammed and all idolatries and heresies, resolve to send me Cristobal Colon to the said parts of India to see the said princes, with a view that they might be converted to our holy faith. Thus, having turned out all the Jews from your kingdoms and lordship, your Highnesses gave orders to me that a sufficient fleet I should go to the said parts of India. I shall forget sleep and shall work at the business of navigation, so that the service is performed. But the natives, they were so nice. I mean, we'd be nuts not to enslave them, right? Here's the other question. To what extent is Columbus's mentality being played out in a much more gentle form, but by people today in the United States who hire people who are here without documentation, pay them half of the minimum wage, and threaten them constantly?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
I mean, arguably what Columbus was doing was one of the earliest forms of capitalism. He was acquiring capital, slaves, their capital.